How do you build a high-performing culture? This is Culture Architects. Candid conversations with extraordinary leaders sharing their biggest successes, failures, and lessons learned on their culture journeys. Here's David J. Friedman.
Welcome back to my conversation with Roberta Matuson, Talent Maximizer, Executive Coach, and President of Matuson Consulting. Last time, Roberta shared her fascinating story of coming into corporate leadership at the age of 24 and her experiences with managing up and managing down. She also shared how magnetic leaders are crucial to building the kind of organizations that people want to work for. In this episode, we're going to dig a lot deeper, and we're going to look at what else needs to be factored in to bring companies up to that kind of level. So let's talk about a topic that everybody raises, certainly in my experience, as it relates to attracting and retaining people. And that is the different generations in the workforce. I'm sure that comes up all the time in your work. And I'm just curious about your point of view. Do you think there really are significant differences in what people are looking for, or are they not really that different?
Well, I think on the surface they're different, but at the end of the day, everyone is looking for autonomy, the ability to get their job done the way they would like to get it done. So they don't care for the micromanager. Everybody wants to be treated with dignity and respect. Everybody wants to be paid equitably. So I think there are those core things, but then I do think different generations value different things. So for example, Gen Z, and I'm a parent of two Gen Z kids. So, they want a lot of opportunity for development, right? But baby boomers, they'd like development, but no, they don't want to like sit in the classroom for, 20 days a year. They've kind of done that. So you got to kind of figure out how to give people what they need in that moment and not just have a blanket statement. We do an annual culture summit, and we had last year a guy, Kent Weisenberger, who does a tremendous amount of work in the area, has done his own original research over thousands of people looking at generations. And he talks about how do you, specifically with Generation Z, how do you attract and retain those particular people, since they're a huge part of the workforce. And he says something very similar, that one of the biggest things they want is they want development. They want to grow. They want to learn. And if you're not a place where they feel like their career is advancing, they certainly don't have the same, I'm going to use the word loyalty, though we could mean a lot of different things by that. Some people by loyalty mean you stick with a company no matter what. But they don't have that sense that I'm going to be here forever unless it's a place I want to be here. And one of the reasons I'd want to be here is because I feel like I'm growing, I'm learning, I'm developing, I'm improving my skills. And if you're not providing that, you're going to lose those people. Is that your experience? Yes. But now that goes back to the branding, right? So let's say you are one of those companies where people have a lot of opportunities to grow. And you're not like, you're not touting that. You're not letting people know, like case studies. Here are people who've moved up in the organization within the last year, or within months or whatever. Then you're losing that opportunity. But I think that also brings us back to, the whole generation thing. And the other day, I wrote a piece for Forbes on Bear. They put in this DSO, which I call dumb, stupid management, but I don't know what they call it.
So what does that stand for?
It is a situation where they have eliminated, as of July 1st, they will have eliminated almost all of middle managers. And managers will now have 40 to 80 direct reports.
Wow.
Okay. And so somebody from Bear reached out to me. He's a director, and he said to me, the biggest problem that we're seeing, and it hasn't even gone into play yet, is that there's no career opportunities anymore. You got 40 to 80 people trying to get to one spot. That's kind of like, trying to win the Miss America pageant or something. So the odds are pretty low.
So, assuming that they're not stupid, maybe they are, but I come from one of our fundamentals, we call it work from the assumption that people are good, fair, and honest, the positive intent. I got to believe they're not all idiots. They must have some reason they think this is a good idea. So what's their perspective on that?
Well, from what I have read, and again, this was in the Wall Street Journal, the CEO had this idea and he was speaking with a consultant at McKinsey who said, oh, yeah, I think this is a great idea. And so they went with it. But if you remember the days of what's called holacracy, that's when Zappos tried this and they eliminated their entire middle management team. There are other companies that have tried it. And to my knowledge, nobody's doing it anymore with the exception of maybe one company.
Right.
So it's not like it hasn't been tried. So I have no idea. I just made this guy a bet. I just said to him, reach out to me in 2 years. I guarantee that the CEO will be gone. He will get a huge package on the way out. And this DSO will be history.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't seem to match what we know of just human interactions.
It doesn't make sense. And you, David, know as well as I do, one person with 40 or 80 direct reports,
they're not getting any attention.
Cannot give those people what they need.
Yes.
It's impossible.
Yeah. And so when it comes to then attracting the kind of people that you want to attract, I understand that we have to be the kind of company we want to be that would attract them. And certainly development is a part of that. We also have to maybe, as you're describing, we've got to promote that because to your point, if nobody knows about it, then, okay, it's nice that we're that kind of place, but we're not going to attract people because they weren't aware of it. So what are some of the other things that a company should do? Let's separate from the marketing or the branding aspect of that, things that they actually should do in their company to be the kind of place that people would want to stay.
Well, I think they need to pay people like livable wages, right? A lot of people, they don't even pay at market. And if you want good people, it's going to cost money. I mean, if you want to drive a Mercedes, it's going to cost more than a Volkswagen. It just is. So, don't try, and especially in this economy where the employer is back on the, in charge, so to speak, they have more leverage. Don't try to buy people on sale because as soon as the economy turns the other way, and we've seen this happen time and time again, those people are going to be gone. And you'll have invested resources in developing and training them, and they're going to go somewhere else.
Yeah. And we all know the cost of replacing somebody, not just in terms of the actual raw cost, but the cost of the lost productivity, the expertise, et cetera, is a pretty big issue.
Yes, and the loss of customers, right?
Yeah.
And revenue, absolutely.
We were talking to a CEO in a previous podcast, and I was asking him about how does culture contribute to the bottom line? And one of the things he talked about was because of their culture, they have so little turnover, and they're in an industry, as many are, where providing expertise to their customers is really important. And if you're losing people all the time, that expertise is walking out the door. It's pretty hard to do that. If you've got people who've been with you for 25 years, they've developed relationships as well, but certainly a level of expertise that they're providing to customers. And so it's a bottom line issue.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But as you point out, if he has very little turnover, on the other side, he might be breathing his own exhaust. Like new ideas aren't coming in. People don't have anywhere to go because nobody's leaving. So you got to find that happy balance. That's so important.
And that's an interesting point you're raising, Roberta. And one of the things that I see in the vast majority of our clients are companies that I would describe as small to medium-sized entrepreneurial companies. So everyone has a different definition of what is small or medium. To me, in employee size, they have 50 or 100 or 200 people. They're not Microsoft or Zappos. And one of the challenges that companies face, I faced it in my own company, is if we're only of a certain size, to your point earlier, there's not a lot of career tracking that's possible. There's learning that's possible, but you're not necessarily going to move into a management role if that was a goal of yours, if it's a small company and there aren't many management roles. So what does a smaller company do to be able to keep people, not attract, but to retain people when they're not going to have career pathing opportunities just by the sheer size of the company.
Well, we've actually addressed that. I have clients that are also a similar size. And what we've done is we've put levels in. So, you might start out as a customer service rep 1, and then you might go to a level 2 or level 3, or you start as a coordinator and then you get moved into, a manager. Now, you have to keep in mind, a lot of people have manager titles. They're not managing people, they're managing functions, or they're given these titles because they're dealing with customers. And customers aren't thrilled with talking to coordinators.
Good point.
But if it's a manager, that's a different story, or a supervisor. So, that's how we address it. As they gain more experience and more knowledge, there's a level that they can bump up to, get a pay raise, bump up again, get another pay raise, maybe move into a different department so they can expand their skill set. So it's not all up, it's, around as well.
Got it. So I was just shifting gears a little bit. I was reading an interesting article last week that somebody sent me that was from Harvard Business Review. And I didn't look to see the date, but my impression was it just came out. I could be wrong about that. Maybe this person just saw it and sent it to me. But it was an interesting article this woman consultant who works with companies around culture wrote. And she was talking about defining culture. And she had an interesting idea that I had never seen before. And I'm curious if you've seen this and your thoughts about it. But she was very big in describing culture in terms of, I'm going to use the word dilemmas. And what she meant by that is that in many companies' statements of what their culture is, her observation was, it all sounds nice, but it doesn't really tell me what decision would I make if I were faced with going direction A or direction B? And she gave examples of creating dilemmas, and that's what she called them, dilemmas, where you describe a scenario where you could legitimately go in 2 different directions about a decision you'd make, whether it was a resource decision or a customer decision. And her point was that your statements of culture should tell people in our company, we prioritize A over B. And so maybe an example would be your description before of somebody, if this is a company that we're going to work people to death, but pay them a lot of money. Okay, well, then that's what we do here. Now that's a fairly extreme example, maybe. But her point of view was creating dilemmas and scenarios like that is a really useful way to help teach leaders what decisions should you make given our particular culture. And I thought that was an interesting approach.
I think so too.
I don't know if you've seen that before.
No, I have not.
No, I hadn't. But the idea is that your culture should be helping guide decision making. And I certainly see many organizations, and I'm sure you've seen them as well. And this is one of these things, I'm a bit of a contrarian on some of the traditional culture building things. And when I see everybody's vision, mission, value statements, so many of them are so meaningless. And I mean, almost all of them are meaningless. It's rare that I see one that's not meaningless. And particularly their missions. We're the leading provider of whatever while taking care of all of our stakeholders and being a place where employees can grow and making money and contributing to our community and all that stuff. And they say, if you ask them, our mission should help us make decisions. And I think, well, what decision would anybody make that would be helpful in guiding me about a decision? I can't think of one.
That's funny.
Yeah. And I see that stuff all the time.
Right. Which is why I don't do that with organizations. Like I don't help them create their culture statement or their mission statement or any of that. I'm like, let's just do good work. Let's just treat people well. Yeah. Let's just go back to the basics, you know, and our people will speak for that.
Well, and in the work that we do, it's very similar in terms of it being very down to earth. We teach companies to define their culture in terms of the behaviors like honoring commitments. This is the way we do things here. And then we have a structured way, as our audience would know, to teach those behaviors, not just put them on the wall, but to teach and practice and talk about and explore. So what does that mean? And why do we struggle to honor commitments? And what can we do better about that? And why is that such an important thing? And if we've defined those behaviors clearly enough in real action terms, not in big, lofty, wonderful looking statements on the website, but real action terms, and we teach those with enough consistency, those start to be how we do things around here.
And we hold people accountable, because
Absolutely.
when they don't abide by our shared set of values and beliefs, and they don't do that, and they consistently don't do that, then they don't work for us anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So as you look at, I'm curious, you've been consulting with lots of different companies, and you've seen over your career, I'm not going to say how many years that is, but you've seen over your career a lot of trends. If you were to identify, so what's the biggest shift you see, do you think, from what's different today, if that, maybe nothing, but what's different today, do you think, about how to attract and retain top talent than it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago? What's different?
Well, honestly, I think it's all about the social media. So when I was growing up in the corporate world, if we had a crappy boss, we'd be at happy hour telling our friends, right? And now happy hour goes on 24/7.
Good point.
People are sharing on TikTok, they're sharing on their Facebook page, their Instagram, they're on Glassdoor, they're letting everybody know, like, this is not a great place to work, or this boss is terrible. So there are no secrets anymore. And I think that's the big difference. So when you look at, if I'm going to do a job change, I'm going to look around, I'm going to do my research and find out what are people saying about what it's like to work there before I put my name in and apply. Because if the ratings are so low, I'm out of there. I'm going to go to somebody else and I'd rather work there.
And do you think, is it your experience that younger people today are much more likely to do that research? I mean, they should, but do they do that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if it's online, it's true.
Yeah.
Even though you and I know that the people who are most discontented are the ones that are going to write reviews. If you're really happy, it's rare that you go on and say, "Hey, I'm really happy."
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And certainly we know that that those loudest voices tend to be heard a lot more than anything else. And you can be, to your point with social media, and it used to be the case in a variety of areas, I think, of our world, that you had to be an expert of some sort. You have to have some credibility to put your voice out there.
Not anymore.
Now you don't have to have any credibility. You just have to have an opinion about something, and everybody can read it.
Absolutely. And I also think that today, and I love this, younger people are just unfiltered. Last night I was having dinner with some friends, and their 27-year-old son showed up and he joined us for dinner. And man, if you could be a fly on the wall, the things that he was saying about his company and what it's like to work there, it was like completely unfiltered. Whereas I probably had, even at his age, wouldn't have been like that, because I'd have no idea, does this woman know someone that works? Completely unfiltered.
Interesting. But you're a New Yorker, so you would have been unfiltered more. So
I would have been discreetly unfiltered, not completely unfiltered.
Nice. So as I bring our interview to a close, I'm curious about two things. One is, I'm always curious when somebody's been doing something for an extended period of time. I think about me as a leader, that there are things that I know now that I wish I knew when I was a much younger leader. I mean, you talked about how naive you were when you were in your first company and didn't know how to manage up or across the organization. And so there are
even
things,
down.
Or even down. And so there are things you've learned over these years that you kick yourself thinking, boy, if I was sharing some of that wisdom with somebody who was the younger version of Roberta, what's one or two things you would share with the younger version of Roberta?
Well, that's honestly what I've done, and
that's what
but it's funny when this is the third edition of Suddenly in Charge came out in April, and when the first edition came out, I wrote a letter to everyone who ever worked for me, apologizing, like for being like a terrible boss.
Wow.
And what happened, what was so crazy was one of my former employees saw it. It was on like BNET, CBS, whatever. And they saw the note and they wrote back to me, David, and they said, "You weren't that bad." And you know, when they said the words that bad, you knew you were pretty bad. So I have done my mea culpa. I have apologized. I have learned. I'm a much stronger leader today than I was then. And so I'm not the same person, thankfully.
Yes. Yeah. And hopefully we're all growing people.
Yes.
So if people want to learn more about your work or get your books, where would they go?
They can go to MatussonConsulting.com. If they want to connect with me on LinkedIn, if they send a note saying, hey, I was on your podcast, I was listening, feel free to send me a note.
Okay.
They can follow me on X at Matuson, or they can actually pick up the phone, because I will will pick it up myself, and that number's on the website as well.
And what email would they use if they were?
They would use Roberta at MatussonConsulting.com.
Great. Super. Well, I appreciate the chance to chat with you today, Roberta. Really fascinating conversation. I love sharing just the experiences that you've had and the wisdom you've gained over the years. So thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And that's it for today's episode of Culture Architects with Roberta Matuson. Thanks for tuning in. If you've been enjoying our show, make sure that you subscribe, and that way you're going to get automatic updates anytime new episodes are released. If you have a minute, I'd also love it if you would leave us a review, and that way more culture fans like you can discover this show. And if you'd like to learn more about building a high-performing culture in your organization, check us out at CultureWise.com. See you next time.
This has been Culture Architects with David J. Friedman. Join us next time for more insights and wisdom from great leaders in all walks of life. To book David for your next event, or to learn more about his writing, speaking, or consulting, go to davidjfriedman.com. Culture Architects with David J. Friedman is a production of CultureWise.